We've been doing this a long time.
Long time. Well, this young man, Andrew Aydin, came to me at the end of my campaign in 2008 and said, Congressman, you should write a comic book. And I said, well, I don't know about that. And he kept coming, came back again and again, and I said, yes, if you write it with me. It reminded me of a little book called Martin Luther King Jr. and the Montgomery Story. It was a comic book about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the bus boycott in Montgomery. It sold for 10 cents, 14 pages, and I read that book back in 1958 when I was 18 years old. And that book inspired me and hundreds and thousands of other young people to get involved in the civil rights movement. So by the urging of Andrew and saying that let's do it, it would inspire another generation to get involved, especially young people and people not so young, elementary school students, middle school, high school, college students. And so far, I must tell you, March's been an unbelievable success.
Well, that's wonderful. Andrew, I know you wrote your college dissertation on Martin Luther King and the Montgomery story. What was this comic's historical significance in your mind?
Great. So after the congressman told me about the comic on that campaign, I was really captivated by the idea that a comic book could have had such an impact on social movements, and in particular the civil rights movement. And so I started researching Martin Luther King and the Montgomery story almost as soon as that campaign was over. And then when I went to graduate school, I started reading and pitched to my professors at Georgetown that I would write a public policy graduate thesis on a comic book. And they went along with it, bless their hearts. You know, what was so magnificent about it is that you found out that this comic was used at a time and produced at a time when the civil rights movement was just finding its footing. When SCLC was being founded, letters from one of the participants of that founding, a wonderful man by the name of Will Campbell, was writing letters to the fellowship, specifically to Alfred Hassler, who was the fellowship's director of publications, urging him to make this comic book. And when it came down to the point where they had a script, that script went to Dr. King. And Dr. King sat down and edited it. And he had changes, and he sent it in a letter. And he said, you know, this panel looks great, but I think perhaps if you want to be more accurate, you'll change this dialogue. And you know, I had never in my life imagined Dr. King being a comic book editor. But that was what was so beautiful to me, is that, you know, for all of the negative attention that comics were getting at that time, here was an example that was the opposite of everything everyone was saying. If there was any truth in what they were saying about them being dangerous, it was that they were dangerous to the status quo, and that they were a force for justice, not just in the stories that they were telling, but in what their message could empower people to do. And so I wrote my thesis and turned it in. And last year you might have read the Creative Loafing article I wrote about it. The congressman guest edited an issue on the future of nonviolence. So if you want to read more, you can check that out. It's online.
That's great. Congressman, I know there's a concern that young people who didn't directly experience the struggle for civil rights, as you did, might forget the sacrifices that were made. Do you see marches perhaps playing a role in reaching younger people to help them be mindful of the past and the sacrifices that were made?
I do see March, this book, not just March Book 1, but Book 2 and Book 3, being a major tool, an instrument to help educate, sensitize, and move young people to stand up, to speak out, and find a way to get in the way. Now, when I was growing up in rural Alabama during the 40s and the 50s, and would see those signs that would say white and colored, white men, white women, colored women, and would ask my parents, why? They would say, that's the way it is. But Marsh would tell you that when I met Rosa Parks, 1957 at the age of 17, and met Dr. King the next year at the age of 18, it inspired me to get in the way and to get in good trouble, necessary trouble. And that's what I want to see, another generation of young people speak up and speak out. And don't be silent.
Well, this is an excellent tool for reaching that group of people. And I know it's really caught on in school libraries, which I know has to be gratifying to both of you because you are penetrating young minds in informative years.
Well, the book is doing very well among the librarian community. We were honored by the American Library Association. The book won the Coretta Scott King Book Award. And Andrew would tell you it just won the Robert Kennedy Book Award. And there are students at Georgia State University here. All of the freshmen are reading the book. We spoke that last Sunday, today a week ago,
yes,
to more than 3,000 freshmen about the book. They're all reading it. And then last Monday, we were at Michigan State University for more than 8,000 freshmen reading the book, and the entire community of East Lansing, they call it one book, one community.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Andrew, the events depicted in March weren't part of your own life experiences, but I wanted to ask you what was involved from your perspective in creating a narrative that captured the spirit of the times and was also dramatically effective.
Well, I think so much of this is an oral history that I've heard the congressman tell. He is an unbelievable storyteller, and this is a tradition that's been passed down amongst some of our century's greatest leaders. And so a lot of this was just interviewing the congressman, saying, tell me your story. Many of these stories I've heard him tell to kids, and when you see the way they react and their faces light up and their minds come alive to the possibilities. So it's just taking that and putting it down on paper, and then having those late night conversations, those weekend conversations with, how do you think this works, sir? Is this what you want to see? And then, at the same time, honestly, as much as I read books about the civil rights movement, I was also reading books about how to make comics. It's like Scott McCloud and Will Eisner and the how-to manuals that they put together. Even when I was trying to find a publisher, which is a great DragonCon story we can tell later, I was reading that Warren Ellis publication from his old columns, Come In Alone, that I'd had since I was a high schooler, thinking maybe one day I'll have the fantasy of writing a comic, So it was a combination of everything that I love to learn about. And that made it not work, but a true joy to create.
Right. Now, Nate Powell, the artist of March, is not here today, obviously, but I wanted to ask you about the process of working with him. What was that like to craft this book in a collaborative way?
Well, as the congressman says, we've become a band of brothers. And working with Nate, we were just emailing and texting today. The digital revolution has made this process much easier. And so as we put together our script, and send it to Nate. Nate's sending us back penciled pages with his suggestions and his comments, and then we're having a dialogue. It's a continuous, complementary, creative process where we are all truly equal collaborators. And so, if we say maybe we think that you should show this piece in that panel, Nate is at the same time saying, I like this moment. Can we talk more about this? So it's a very balanced and wonderful collaboration.
Right.
It's unbelievable to work with these two young guys. Andrew is right, and I've said over and over again, we're like a circuit of trust, a band of brothers. Nate is not here, and I'm sorry that he's not here, but during a book signing, Nate was signed first, and Andrew was signed second, and I was signed last. Sometimes by the time this little book get to me, he would draw a little chicken. And he have this chicken saying, amen. And because in the book, we tell the story that when I was a little boy, growing up in rural Alabama, raising chicken and peanuts, growing peanuts and cotton corn, but on the farm, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens. And Nate understood very well, as we tell in the book. We would gather all these chickens together in the chicken yard from time to time, and my brothers and sisters and cousins would line the outside of the chicken yard, but I would start speaking and preaching to the chickens. And when I look back, some of these chickens would bow their head, some would shake their head. They never quite said amen, but they tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me in the Congress. And some of those chickens were a little more productive. But Nate has the ability to take the script and with the drawing that he gives and make the book, the words sing, move.
Well, I have to say, I have not looked at chickens the same since I read March, so it was a great tool for you to use. Congressman, the book depicts your first meeting with Dr. King. No one but you could know what that meeting looked like to capture his office and his manner and the way he carried himself. Did you describe to Nate what that scene looked like, what he wore, what his office looked like? Seeing it recreated like that must have been a very powerful moment for you.
Well, it is powerful, and when I see the images, it brings me almost to tears, really. Growing up, I grew up very shy as a little boy, and no one tends to believe that these days, but I wanted to attend Troy State College, not known as Troy University. I submitted my application, my high school transcript. I never heard a word from the school. So I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, I had been accepted at a little college in Nashville, Tennessee. So Dr. King heard that I was there and suggested when I was home for spring break to come and see him. And so on a Saturday morning in March of 1958, I boarded a Greyhound bus and traveled from Troy to Montgomery. And a young lawyer who had been a lawyer for Rosa Parks, for Dr. King, and his name was Fred Gray. He had been our lawyer during the march from Selma to Montgomery and during the Freedom Ride, met me and drove me to the First Baptist Church in Montgomery. So this scene, I'm walking to the First Baptist Church, pastored by the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, a colleague of Dr. King. And I was so scared. I didn't know what to say or what to do. And Dr. King said, "Oh, you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" And I said, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." I gave my whole name. And he started calling me the boy from Troy. But it was just wonderful, just wonderful.
That was a powerful scene, very powerful scene in the book. You mentioned that March is the first part of a trilogy. And I wanted to ask you both, was this always planned as a trilogy? Can you describe what the next book looks like and where it takes us to?
So this was not a trilogy. It started off as one book. And I mean, when we first pitched it to Chris Staros, he just said, "Go write as much of it as you can."
Chris is a publisher. And you should tell the story, Andrew, how we
met Chris?
Yeah, because it's so fitting.
Because we're here. Okay, I'll tell that story and then So we found our publisher by coming to DragonCon. Congressman, right? Congressman came to see what this was all about, because I come every year. And he said, "I wanted to see, I want to come." And so he did, and we came down, we were having lunch in the Hyatt. This was before it was all fancied up, and it was, the Hyatt's a landmark here. It's so much history. In fact, it'll actually be in book, the 1968 story. So we're having lunch down there, and Jimmy Palmiotti, who some of you may know, sometimes he's called the mayor of comics, comes up to our table and goes, "Oh my God, you're John Lewis. You're a real celebrity." And I'm having this moment of, oh my gosh, it's my childhood meeting my adulthood. Because I remember the first year I came, Jimmy was down in the Artist Alley, which was actually then the dealer's room, selling Ash comics with Joe Quesada at a table. And that was the first time I ever met him. And so they start chatting, and so, Jimmy just says on his way out, "If you need anything, feel free to give me a call." And so I gave him a call. I called the front desk at Marvel Comics and said, "Hi, this is Andrew Aydin. I work for Congressman John Lewis, and I'd like to talk to Jimmy Palmiotti." And I think they're still very sensitive about anybody associated with a member of Congress calling a comic book publisher. Because he called me back right away. It was actually Amanda Connor who called first. And she just said, "Are you looking for Jimmy?" And I was like, "Yes, very much so." And she put me right on, and I talked to him, and I explained him the idea, and he was like, "This could really work." I was like, "Oh, I hope so. I mean, that's what we're, thinking." And he said, he took a minute, he thought about it, and he said, "The only person I know who could publish this the right way would be Chris Staros." And so I wrote him an email just out of the blue, referred by Chris Staros, or referred by Jimmy Palmiotti, like it made me official, And he took it, and we ran with it. And then I met him a couple months later in New York, and he was at another show, and I lived every fanboy's dream, and I pitched a publisher on a comic book idea across the table. And he said, "Okay, I like it. Have you ever written anything else?" "Nope." "All right, so why don't you take a couple months, write as much as you can, and send it to me, and I'll let you know if we can do this." And so Congressman and I got together, and, actually I went back that night and went to a friend of mine's house, and I started to think, maybe we should celebrate. This is a big deal. And my friend says, "No, you need to sit down and start writing." And so I started working on it that night, and then the Congressman and I got together when we came back and worked on it for about 3 months before we sent off what was almost the version that is book one. And it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks after that I get a phone call from Chris that was the most nerve-wracking conversation perhaps of my life, when he calls me up and says, "Hey, so I read it." Real deadpan, long pause, fighting, and then he says, "Yeah, I liked it. I think we're going to publish it." And so I start dancing around my front yard, and my dog's looking at me like, "What's going on?" And anyway, so that was how it happened. And so wait, there was an original question. Let's get to that.
How it became a trilogy.
Right. Okay. So. It became a question of what do you leave out, right? When you sit down to write the complete work and you put together the narratives, because there is a distinct narrative to this. It's almost, book 2 is basically Empire Strikes Back, right? there is no resolution. There is violence, and then there is more violence, and there is a continued conflict, and almost a hunting of these activists through the South as they take on new fronts. You guys might have seen the mugshot tweet that went viral over the summer, where the congressman got out of Parchman Penitentiary after 37 days in Parchman and even longer in a Mississippi jail for trying to use a white restroom. And the violence escalating and the danger escalating. During the Freedom Rides, Congressman had Coca-Cola crate smashed over his head, knocked unconscious, and the only reason that the Freedom Riders were able to escape with their lives was because one white gentleman by the name of Floyd Mann, who was the public safety director, fired shots into the air to scare off the attackers. And so you deal with these ferocious moments in history. And then to boil it down to something, what do you leave out? Whose contribution do you say is not worth being on the page? And so by the time I turned in the whole script, and the congressman and I had gone through all these stories, it is 500 pages.
It's a lot to draw.
Yeah, and so I thought, God bless Nate Powell, right? And when Nate took a look at it, he was like, this is going to take me years, And he also relayed it out, because I think our page count at first had it at 280, right? And Nate was like, "No, dude, you got to spread these things out. There's more drama in this. There's moments that you're not thinking about that happen between the action scenes." And he taught me so much about creating comics, because he's been doing it since he was 13.
Now, was this an arranged marriage between you and did Chris Staros put you two together?
Yes.
You didn't know Nate before this?
No, we got married before we ever met each other.
It happens that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Congressman, Andrew touched on Freedom Riders, and you've described Freedom Riders as one of the untold stories of the civil rights movement. Book 2, it seems, will help to remedy that and tell their story and bring them greater.
Well, when you look at the cover for Book 2, There's a scene in Anniston, Alabama. They attempt to burn the bus. It is drama, unbelievable drama. And then it continued during the Freedom Ride. When you arrived in Montgomery, as Andrew stated, an angry mob met us there. And if it hadn't been for this man, Floyd Mann, who fired the gun straight in the air and said, there'll be no killing here today, there'll be no killing here today, some of us would not have made it. Several years later, I went back to Montgomery for the dedication of the Civil Rights Memorial, a short distance from Dr. King Church, built by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's a beautiful place if you haven't been there. It's an unbelievable place. As a memorial to all of the martyrs in the movement. Lynn, the same young lady that did the Vietnam Memorial, designed it. And we were standing there, and he said to me, he said, "John Lewis, do you remember me?" And I said, "Mr. Mann, how can I forget you? You saved my life." And he gave me a hug. I hugged him, and we both started crying. And this is the drama. When we leave Montgomery, there was an attempt before leaving Montgomery at a church where we were forced to stay all night. People tried to burn down the church, the First Baptist Church. The same church where I met Dr. King and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. It was a mass meeting on the night of May 21st, 1961. And President Kennedy federalized the Alabama National Guards, put the city of Montgomery under martial law, called out United States Marshals to protect us. And we left, traveling to Mississippi. You get to Mississippi, and Andrew would tell you in book 2, black and white freedom riders, men, women, rabbis, priests, ministers, teachers, lawyers, doctors. We filled the city jail, the county jail. Then they took us down to Parchment and the state penitentiary there. And you get to Parchment, and I may be giving away too much.
Well, I think there's no spoilers, sir.
You get to Parchment, and the guy meet us with his gun drawn, and he said, "Sing your GD freedom songs now. We have ends here, if you follow me, that we beat you, we eat you." And they forced all of us, now in the jail cells, black and white people, rested together, but we couldn't stay in the same jail cell. They segregated us. We walk in, and we all had to strip naked. And while we were all standing there nude, all of the guys, black and white guys, a guy was standing with a rifle drawn. And then if you had a mustache, a beard, you had to cut off, they ordered you to take a shower, and you had any facial hair, you had to cut it off. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And so we went into our jail cells in twos and stayed there for maybe an hour and a half or so. Then they brought us a pair Mississippi State Penitentiary shorts and the undershirt. That's what we kept on. You can take a shower only once a week. And it was hell. But people survived. In a matter of time, all forms of public transportation was desegregated. The signs that said white waiting, colored waiting came tumbling down.
Well, I think the story will enlighten people of all ages because, as you know, this is not a widely known part of the story. So I think it's going to be a really valuable story for people of all ages. So I thank you for that. You know, I wanted to open up the questions to the audience. I know you guys probably have some things you want to know about March and the Congressman's work over the decades. So does anybody have a question? How do we want to work this with mics or whatever? Are we equipped to do this?
Please do.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, sir, I couldn't wait. This is more than an honor. I think I feel like you felt when you met Dr. King. I mean, thank you so much for what you not only have done and are doing. And I just can't believe that I found out about this 5 minutes ago because it's not written really big in the schedule. So any organizers, please, if you all do this again, make it at least bold print. We just happened to see it. I just went, what? And I just ran here. I don't even know where our kids are. Anyway, my question is, sir, with all respect and seriousness, how can we get this very simply book into the schools, both private and public? We live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana now, and I was just wondering if you all have a website, or what do you do if you want to, I'm a parent, I'm not a teacher in the schools, but to let the schools know this is available.
Andrew, you should talk about that.
Well, first, I hope you can join us. We're going to go to LSU.
I'm a professor at LSU. Okay. I had a Good Friday class, and I had a colleague cover my class on Friday. I'm basically, and I did have a meeting with some colleagues in the area, but I said I was coming to I was coming to a meeting of minority faculty. This is way better.
You all can keep a secret, right?
So, and the second part of this is this is very much our mission. The Southern Poverty Law Center put out a report that said 47 states in the Union fail to adequately teach the civil rights movement. 3 of those states have no standards whatsoever, which means they don't actually have to teach the civil rights movement. What we're trying to do is to make that as easy as possible to integrate into the curriculum. We've prepared a teacher's guide with the help of the school library journal.
Librarian.
All right. Thank you for your service. But you know, this is an old-fashioned organizing campaign. You have to write letters, you have to talk to people and spread the word. Budgets are tight right now. One of the things I do in the congressional office is I run a surplus books program where we take Library of Congress surplus books and send them to libraries and schools in the 5th District. Because I know that was the first thing that got cut, and we haven't brought those budgets back. So that's part of why we try to make sure that March was very inexpensive, so that that wouldn't be prohibited. So, but you've got to organize. You've got to talk to the people, and get it on your syllabus or your colleague's syllabus. If you look at something like Persepolis, that book's in the top 200 on Amazon whenever we go back to school. And so, there is an opening that we have now where graphic novels are being accepted as literature. And I think someone like Congressman Lewis embarking on this journey into the medium only bolsters that credibility. And in fact, he's the first member of Congress to write a graphic novel. Probably the only one that should. Yeah. But it's up to you, so thank you so much for being here.
When do you come to LSU?
October 22nd, I want to say. Just check my website. I'll have it up there. It's andrewaydin.com, but it's homecoming. We're going to be there. So we just got it confirmed last week.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I saw another hand over here.
Yes, feel free to come. Which hand is that you're pointing at? George?
I don't know what's scarier.
We're all a big family here.
What you're doing is very, very, very funny. Congressman Lewis, I am honored and I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you, sir.
You had a slide like 2 or 3 before about just to illustrate the point. That is happening again. Ferguson, in Missouri, we're going through something, the scale's different, but it's similar. History doesn't, repeat, but it rhymes. And I want to ask you how something like your graphic novel might be used to speak to the current events that people are facing right now.
Well, the graphic novel would tell people today that less than 50 years ago, next year we will commemorate and celebrate the 5th anniversary of the attempted march from Selma to Montgomery, March 7, 1965, that became known as Bloody Sunday. But on that day, 600 of us, it was on a Sunday afternoon, line up in twos to walk in a peaceful fashion, not blocking traffic. We were orderly. We were exercising our constitutional right. We were walking just 2 by 2. It was silent. No one saying a word. And when we got to the highest point on the Edna Pettus Bridge down below, we saw a sea of blue, Alabama state troopers. And we continued to walk and came within hearing distance of the state troopers. A major spoke up and said, "This is an unlawful march. It will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse, return to your homes or to your church." And young Jose Williams, who was marching with me, I was 25 years old, I had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter. I was looking straight ahead. The major gave us a moment to kneel and pray. And the major said, "Troopers, advance." And you saw these guys putting on their gas masks. They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, bullwhips, trampling us with horses, releasing the tear gas. I was the first one to be attacked. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick. I had a concussion at the bridge. I thought I saw death. I thought I was going to die. Almost 50 years later, I don't recall how I made it back across that bridge, back to the church that we had left from. But I do recall being in the church, and someone asked me to say something. And I stood up and said, "I don't understand it, how President Johnson can send troops to Vietnam, but cannot send troops to Selma, Alabama, to protect people who only desires to register to vote." And the next thing I knew after I said those few words, I've been admitted to a little hospital called the Good Samaritan Hospital, where a group of nuns took care of 17 of us. But people saw the film footage that night, the next day, they read about it, they saw the photographs. I believe ABC News, Andrew, was having a judgment day, a judgment in Nuremberg. And when the news came on, they flashed and showed Selma. They thought it was a continuation. And there was a sense of righteous indignation all across America. By that Tuesday, there was demonstration in more than 82 cities in America. Demonstration at the White House, at the Department of Justice, almost every major college and university campus in the country. And President Johnson, 8 days later, made one of the most meaningful speeches than any American president, and made in modern time on the whole question of civil rights and voting rights. And he spoke to the nation, and he closed that speech, and he said, "And we shall overcome." We call it the "We Shall Overcome" speech. That night I was sitting next to Dr. King in the home of a local family. We watched and listened to President Johnson, and tears came down his face. He started crying, and we all cried a little. He, the President of the United States, no president had ever said before in a speech, "And we shall overcome," using the theme song of the movement. And Dr. King said, "We'll make it from Selma to Montgomery, and the Voting Rights Act will be passed." Congress debated it, passed, and it was signed into law on August 6, 1965. But some people gave their lives. The only thing I did, I gave a little blood. That's all. Andrew?
Yeah, I think, do you mind if we add something to this? First, a takeaway from that story is the solidarity demonstrations. An incident happens in one city, and having the infrastructure to have those protests follow up in a nationwide way is what helps put national pressure on the elected leaders to act. We go to a great amount of detail in March to show the communications methods, the ways in which they organized, how they used what was available to them, which in fact were payphones and mimeograph machines. Today we have social media, and we have a large group of armchair activists, but we don't have that national network of students who have organized to create demonstrations that use social media not to say their point of view, but to show up and let their marching feet speak for them. We're starting to see that happen. Just a couple weeks ago, you saw a solidarity demonstration here in Atlanta in which a young student using a hashtag organized 5,000 students to come march to CNN. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think we've got to take a generation and get them to organize, create a new SNCC if we have to, a nationwide organization devoted to the principles of nonviolence, because frankly, that's all that will work. And we have to use social media, technology, these resources that are available to this generation that were not available to those before us, and have them use that to organize so that people show up. You've got to show up. That's the biggest battle. All these people, if they're mad, if they're angry, if there's something they believe in, they need to be there. They need to make their voice heard through their own presence. As the congressman says, you've got to use your bodies. Put your bodies on the line to make your voice heard.
All right, that's great. I know we're getting a little squeezed for time, and we've got a lot more questions. So I want to try to work in. So, how about somebody from this side? We haven't had this side yet. Yeah.
That's all I can see. What did first call?
I'm jealous.
This is actually a question for both of you. Obviously, Martin Luther King, the Montgomery story was very influential. You mentioned that earlier, both in terms of inspiration and instruction. Do you feel that something like March is sort of best presented in the comic book medium in the same way that that was, or is there another medium that you would have preferred given your druthers, or is this just kind of the way you wanted to go with it?
Well, I think this is probably the best way to do it. But when you pick up the book, I know for this guy, and see the drama. When I first got involved in the sit-in, after attending a nonviolent workshop and studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, and you'd be sitting there in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion, waiting to be served. So this was the lunch counter, and someone would come up and spit on you, or put a lighted cigarette out in your hair or down your bag, pour hot water, hot chocolate, hot coffee on you, pull you off the lunch kind of stools. And then you're orderly, you're peaceful. And then the police officer walk up and say you're disturbing the peace, but you're peaceful. And you're taken off to jail. And so people would ask me from time to time in the meetings, students from Vanderbilt or Peabody, Fisk University, or the different schools in Nashville, what should we do? And I've always said we must find a way to dramatize it. Make it plain. Dr. King's father used to say when his son was preaching, he would say, son, make it plain. So you have to find a way to make it plain so people can feel it, almost touch it, smell it. Make it plain, make it real. And that's what March is saying to people. You can do it. We all can do it.
Thank you, sir.
Lady with the hat?
Me with the hat. I don't need to come up. I promise. I can stand over here. I'm a lawyer. I can talk loud. First, thank you. Like everyone else has said, and I'm going to cry.
Don't cry.
Thank you for so much that you have done for this country. As a little girl growing up, I grew up in the segregated South. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, as a matter of fact, and I still live there.
It's a wonderful city.
It is.
If it hadn't been for that city, I wouldn't be here.
Well, it is.
I tell you, it's a wonderful city.
It was a great place, but it's, it's like everywhere else. It was still the segregated South.
Yes.
Now, what I'd like to know is, are you going to be signing your book?
Yeah, we're gonna do it.
You're getting in front of me.
Okay. But the other thing I want to say, and I think you had a part of this, is I had a best friend, and in part because of what you did and what Dr. King did and what others did and Brown versus Board of Education, I finally got to go to school with that person. She went to a different school because as a white girl growing up, I couldn't go there, and I would go and sit in the black section of the theater with her because they would not let her sit with me. And thank you, because she was my best friend, and as a little girl, I never understood that. And fortunately, I had parents who didn't understand that either. But thank you for what you did.
Thank you.
Young man.
When is the March book to come out?
January. So give us like 4.5 more months.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You've been very patient. Yes, ma'am.
Actually asked my question. Thank you. That was very last year, met my husband. He worked with TSA at Birmingham Airport. He came through in September, and he is a white man. He came to talk to you and said thank you. And you actually sent us copies of your books and signed them. They're actually like precious heirlooms to us right now. But I did bring it so that Andrew can sign it. So he's actually beaming in the Hilton. We met here at DragonCon about 4 years ago.
Please tell him I said hi. I remember.
As the other half of an interracial couple living in Alabama, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I got married with him in South Carolina 2 years ago, and it's because of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No other hands? Oh, sorry.
Hello, and honor, as everyone can say. So, are there any plans to start a student organization so that we can get involved and hoping to continue to fight inequality? I feel like, the fight's not over. As you put it, I'm kind of an armchair advocate, and I'd like to do more, and like to learn how I can do more. So, are there any plans or any tips, maybe? I don't know.
Well, I think we find ourselves somewhat in the role of Ella Baker, where the organization itself has to be created by the students. And it has to be theirs. That's what made SNCC so special. And Congressman, you can speak to that to greater effect, but we're going to these schools. We're going to schools all across the country, as many as we can possibly go to, so that we find that one kid, that one young person who starts the ball rolling, who has that first moment of courage, that Greensboro 4, whoever that may be. And we don't know which school it'll happen in. We don't know which state it'll happen in. At this point, we're wondering what time zone we're in. But it's going to happen. I really believe that.
I share the words and the belief, Andrew. I believe it's going to happen. I think something is seething among the American people, and especially young people. And it would be the young that would get out there and push and pull and take us much further down that road. And the day will come, I think, in the not too distant future, when people will look back and say, why were we so quiet? Could there come a time when people should make a little noise and push? I happen to believe at this particular point in our history that we're just too quiet, we're too silent. We need to make some noise. You can make it in different ways. We need to get out and vote. It's a shame and a disgrace that so few people participate in the political process. We complain, but we need to run to the polls and use social media to get people out, to participate, to organize the unorganized, and mobilize. In a democratic society such as ours, the vote is the most powerful, nonviolent instrument or tool that we have, and we have to use it. If not, we're going to lose it.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
It's so great that you're here. I just loved everything that you guys have talked about. I was curious about the trajectory of the story. And of course, the story is about a particular time in your life, but it also has parts about your younger years. So just wondering where the story's going to stop, where March is going to stop. Is that too much of a spoiler?
I don't know. I think
But we have to stop somewhere.
we have to stop.
It just cannot continue. You can't have unfolding drama.
Well, we do hope you'll live forever, sir, and it does keep No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't see us going much further past Inauguration Day. I mean, that's where we frame it. But, I think there's so much of the 60s that needs to be told. And we've honestly been taken aback by the magnitude of the response. You do this, you have a small idea that you think is good, and then when you share it to the world, it becomes something else and becomes much bigger. I think we just want to find stories and tell the stories from the congressman's life and those around him that have lessons that apply to today. That's our biggest goal. And so when we find that last story, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Purple shirt.
I think somebody might be chopping onions in here. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm actually one of your constituents. You were my congressman when I was at Georgia Tech as a student, and then I moved to DeKalb County and had a success with other Congress people, and now I've been redistricted. And
You can always come back,
I mean, I heard I was back in your district. I was so happy. It's a real honor to have you here. DragonCon is something I look forward to. DragonCon is something I look forward to every year. And having you here also is. I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm curious if you have anything to say about the current situation about economic inequality and the continuation of the civil rights movement for everybody.
The last effort of Martin Luther King Jr. was something called the Poor People's Campaign. And I saw him here in Atlanta about 2 weeks before he was assassinated. It was to put the issue and concern of economic equality on the American agenda. He wanted to take people to Washington. He had brought together here in Atlanta, a short distance from here, representatives of the people who had been left out and left behind. They were white, black, Latino, Asian American, Native American, and he never made it there because of the assassination in Memphis. I was with Robert Kennedy when we heard that Dr. King had been assassinated. And I think in a real sense, we have to pick up where Dr. King had left off and address the need of the people of this country. We need to stop spending so much of our limited resources on bombs and missiles and guns. and take care of people. See that all of our children, all of our young people get the best possible education. Health care for everybody. Save the little planet. Protect the environment. Save this little piece of real estate. Make it a little cleaner, a little greener, and a little more peaceful. And then we would be moving, maybe, just maybe, if we get it right here in America, maybe it can serve as a model for the rest of the world. We have to be hopeful and optimistic that we're going to deal with it. That's why the vote is so important. That's why we must organize and get another generation of people, especially young people, out there pushing and pulling. Andrew is right. During the height of the movement, when we first got involved, I had never heard of the internet. Talk about a website, Facebook, and all that. We had an old fax machine. We didn't have a fax machine. We had a mimeograph machine that we turned. And look where we are today. We need to use it. Use the resources. Use the technology for good. It doesn't make sense that a few people can earn so much, and then hundreds and thousands and millions of people in our country don't know whether they're going to get the next meal or where they're going to sleep. It's not fair, it's not right, and it's not just. And if we don't do something about it, history will not be kind for us.
I think we're about out of time, and that is an excellent sentiment to close the questioning. Congressman and Andrew, I want to thank you for sharing your insights on this remarkable book. And I want to tell you all that you asked about a book signing. After this panel, the Congressman, as well as Andrew, will sign copies of March in Artist Alley. If you go in, it'll be the table immediately in front of you in Artist Alley. I encourage you to buy a copy or 2 or 3 to give to friends. I want to thank you both for birthing this truly remarkable book. But I also want to thank you, Congressman. You are an American icon for everything you've given this country for decades. You understood early on that with great power comes great responsibility. And as I noted early on, you truly are a superhero. Thank you. Now go line up and buy books.